this computer. And there, all right, cool. I think we're recording. Can you all see the little red dot?
Yeah.
Up in the top grammar, cool. So, welcome back to semester 2, everybody. Hope your exams all went well. I know us third years had 0, which was great. For the first time, like 4 years, so we're allowed a break. But I hope you all got along good in your exams. I believe you didn't have any coding in semester 1, but at least the first years didn't. But now in semester 2, you're moving on to do EM 108, which is software development for engineers. That's taught by Gabriel Mira Muncien. We had him in first year. He's gas. He's really nice, and he's been teaching software dev for years. But it's all C programming in first year. He goes in from the very basics, assuming that you have no coding experience, which is for the best, because it gives people an environment to ask like the questions that like they might not know the answer to. Like in our first lab, people were asking like what a file path was and like what a directory was, and like somebody who's like good at computers, like, oh yeah, that's easy. But for some people, like they literally don't know what that is, and that's fine. And it's good that he goes in from the very basics to ask those questions. So today we'll just be doing what I did in first year for lab 2. I know most of y'all did the lab 1. So like in terms of like print F and like scan F, you have like the absolute basics down, which is good, which means we can go in with some of the more complex stuff. This one won't be as long as some of our last ones because the intro to C programming that Gabriel teaches kind of starts off slow and then quickly ramps up. So we might do lab 2, and then from there might do 1 or 2 of the harder questions that I have saved here on my Google Drive. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Oh, just for the record also, I'm using CodeBlocks. That's what you're looking at now. This is a IDE, an integrated development environment for C and C++. You'll be using it in second year for object-oriented programming if you're a mechatronics or a electronic engineering student. I highly recommend it as opposed to the online compiler. It's pretty simple to install. There's slight compiler issues when you first install it, but just throw something on the Discord if you have any problems and we can help you out, because it definitely... Oh, somebody sending something in Discord now. No. It is better than the online compiler. Like, it just works way better. So, and it is way easier to keep track of stuff. It tells you exactly where the problems are, that kind of thing. So, for now, I'll just... So, can people raise their hand in the chat if they have coded before? Anybody? We got 1. We got 2. 3, 4 or 5, I think. That's good, because when I did this in first year, I hadn't coded in about 4 years. I did coding in primary school. I did HTML5 in primary school, but I didn't code all the way through secondary school. And because my school didn't offer, I know computer science is on the Leaving Cert now, and it is no joke. They do JavaScript, which is crazy. But a lot of the people that come into this module have no coding experience, which is fine. So I'm going to be doing this as if none of y'all had seen code before. I know some of you did last week, but that first lab can kind of be like shell shock almost. So I will start off just by opening a project. So this is what the home screen for CodeBlocks looks like. So from here, we'll go into File, New, Projects. Then you get to choose what environments you're developing for. So there's like MATLAB, Java, ARM stuff, and you can write INO files for Arduino. You do that for Digital and Analog Electronics 1. That's in semester 1 of second year. Well, first we're going to be doing console application. This just means that it'll open in the command line once we run it. So you just hit go. Don't hit skip this page because it won't come back. We're going to be doing coding in C. Next year I'll be doing C++. I have this currently being saved to I have a document just for C code. So right now I'll just be calling this Makerspace. So there we go. And hit next. And then it automatically selects. This is the compiler that we'll be using today as well. So let's finish that. And here we go. So this is our project file. So I'm going to zoom in. So every time you open a C file in CodeBlocks, it automatically gives you hello world, just to make sure that the compiler is working. Cool. So from here, we'll be going through the questions that I have for the second lab that I did in first year. So let me just grab a look. So I believe the first one, yeah, boys in. Yeah. So the first task of this lab session is to write a simple C program that reads values for the length, width, and depth of a basin. And then you also read in the amount of paint needed to paint each square meter. And then you calculate how much paint you need to paint the outside and how much water you can put in it. So does I deleted the credit buckets. So does anyone want to take a shot at how we would start a program? So I know Gabriel in our reports makes us like go through what we need for each thing. So for this, we need to read in from the user will type in the length, width, the height, and then how many cans of paint to paint a square meter. So does anyone know how we would start this program?
I would say with like int, like as an identifier.
Yeah, so the start of each function in C should always be your variables. So if you have like a series of ints, or if you have a series of ints, or if you have like a string or anything like that, it's good to declare them at the top of the file, so that way you can just use them for the rest of the file and not get confused. For this though, actually, we'll be using floats. Has Gabriel gone through what the difference between an int and a float is?
No.
No.
A float is just a decimal point.
Float can have decimals.
Yeah, it's just you can put in, as opposed to only being able to say 1 meter or 2 meter, you can say 2.4 meters. I believe it's an 8-bit number, so you could have up to 8 decimal places in C. I can't really remember, but it basically just allows you to do decimal points. So we'll need 4 floats, which is one for the length, width, the height, and the cans of paint. So I'll just be calling them. I could call them the full word, but just for ease of typing, I'll just put length, width. Gabriel says depth, and then he meant cans of paint, but we'll just call cans. So you could put in the full word length, the full word width, and the full word depth, but keep in mind every time you use those, you'll have to type them out fully every time, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you're writing hundreds, let's say dozens and up to 100 lines of code, if you have to keep writing in depth every time, probably going to end up with a spelling mistake. And in some compilers, it doesn't actually tell you where the mistake is. It just tells you that you have a mistake. So it is definitely easier to just use single letters. So after this, we'll just need to ask the user to input their variables. So we'll put in just a line of code introducing the user, saying please enter we'll start with the length. So he's gone through what \n does, right? Yeah, so that just skips a line. Make sure it's \, otherwise all your stuff will have /n at the end. Semicolon at the end. And then I believe you've done scanf as well. So when I came back to C programming, this one messed me up a little. It's %, so that's a flag. Then you have to put in what type of variable you're inputting. So for when you were putting in sports, I believe it was %s because you're inputting a string. For this, we'll be doing %f because we're inputting a float. You then just put an apostrophe, and could be wrong, but I believe because we're inputting a number, you have to put an ampersand like before what you're inputting it to. That just, I can't really remember why, but I just know that if you're inputting numbers, you have to put an ampersand before whatever the variable is, just so that way it goes in correctly. If it ends up being wrong, we'll just correct it at the end. So that's the first part. So now I'll just put return. I know Gabby put return exit success, but you can put return 0. The works name for last typing. Let's just see if I run this. Let's say our length is 25 meters, and then that's it. So it runs fine at the minute. So I'm not sure if Gabriel has, you like to mention a lot on ours, just code smart. Like, so yes, we could type out printf, please enter the depth, scanf, fd, and all that kind of stuff. We could type that out, or we could just copy paste it twice. So then we just go in, change this to width, and then change this to depth, and then change that to be a w, change that to be a d, And now if I run this, 25, 10, and 12. It just returns out because I haven't actually done anything with those numbers yet. It's just storing them in memory and then returning 0, closing the program. So that's, and then we'll just do one more for the amount of cans of paint. Please enter the amount of cans. There we go. So if I hit that, I should save it, build it, run it, and then 1, 1, 1, and 2. Cool. So now we have all of our functions set up to read in data from the user in the application. Does anybody have any questions so far, or just questions about code in general?
Sorry, what's that little sign that you put in after the one that you said you have to put in so it registers a number?
That's an ampersand. So that is a like an and symbol, like
Okay.
like something and something, like in a name of a shop or something.
Thanks.
There. Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. When do you have to use the hashtag include the string.h? Because I thought if you're using a %s, that would include a string. And I always thought the percentage.
Was it in the file that he had you write for the first lab?
Yeah, you had what's called the include string.h for the sports thing when you was
Yeah.
referring back to a string.
Yeah, that's so those .h's, those are libraries. So you can write your own library, but I don't believe Gabriel covers them in first year. The computer scientists do in Python. But basically that's just a big list. You can actually open the library file, but basically it's just a big list of functions. So like without include standard IO.h, that printf wouldn't do anything, and the scanf wouldn't do anything. By putting in a standard IO, the program looks at printf, the compiler looks at printf, and it knows where that's coming from. It's coming from that library file, so it actually understands what to do with it. But if that were, for example, for a string, if you didn't have string.h and you tried to input a string or print a string, it wouldn't compile because we're like, what the hell is a string? It wouldn't know what to do with it. So I believe you don't touch on much more libraries other than standard libraries, standard IO, and string. If you end up doing randomization, there's a library called time.h that pulls from Unix time to generate random numbers, because if you use the standard random number generator, the random number is hard baked into the program. So let's say if you say pick a random number between 1 and 10 using the standard random number generator in C, it'll go 7, and it'll be 7 forever. It's just random the first time. So you have to code Mora, which is like a weird Italian version of rock, paper, scissors later on. And I use the time library for that, which is a great word. Time library to generate a random number from Unix time. It just pulls a random integer, and that way it's random every time. So, but for the minute, you'll probably only be using standard IO, standard library, and string. They're good to just put up at the top, because again, once you put them above int main, you don't have to look at them anymore. Does anybody have any other questions before we move on?
Maybe just check the chat, just in case there's anything there that you missed. Or did you get those already?
Oh, geez, there's some chat. Difference between F and S. You change the L for a length in the amount of cans. Oh, yep, that needs to be cans. There you go. That's why you have people watch you code, because otherwise they'll pick it up. So thanks for I didn't notice that. Could you explain the difference between F and S again? S is just a string. It means that you're inputting a list of letters forming a string of letters to form a word or a phrase or just a random bunch of letters. But S is we're inputting a float. So that's a decimal point. So I've been putting in 125 to test, but you can put in like 2.5, 9 3/4, whatever have you. I'll put the chat over here now. Any other questions? Grand. So now that we have all of our data inputted for the reading in of data, we have all of our variables. So now we need to calculate how much paint we need to paint the outside of the box, and how much water, well, it's a basin, how much paint we need to paint the outside of the basin, and how much water we can put in it. So this is where Gabriel talks about this in some of his lectures. We now actually have to calculate. We actually have 2 more floats because we have a float for area, which is the surface area of the box we actually have to paint, and then we have one for volume, which is called vol. That's for the volume inside the box. So this now is just generic geometry. That's the word. So volume of a basin. Any takers?
Length by width by height.
So yep. So that is I don't know if you've done basic arithmetic. It's all code is Americanized, so it's length, and then you have to put an asterisk to the multiplication sign by width, and then that's an 8, and then by depth. Right. So this is just saying that volume is now equal to whatever this is. So then we go down to area. So we have to calculate the surface area of these sides, and these sides. The top and bottom, the left and right, the front and back. So anyone want to take a stab at how you would calculate that? Any takers?
Do length by width for 2 sides, and then the width by the height for the other 2.
Yeah. So it's so we have to do depth by length for the front and back. So that's 2 by depth by length. Then we add that to depth by height for the left hand side, the left and right hand side. So that's 2 by depth by width. And then it's only 1 by length and width because there's no lid on it because it's the basin. So that's just, I'll put in 1 just to make it easier to read. 1 by length by width. I keep on saying depth and height interchangeably. Apologies. Whenever I say depth or height, I mean the same thing. It's just how deep it is. So that's the surface area of the basin in square meters. And then we just multiply that by cans. So if this is the amount of cans that we need to paint per square meter, we just find out the amount of square meters that the actual surface area is, and we multiply that by the amount of cans that we need. Then we just print our answers. So it's printf, and then we say, oh, that's not nice, get that out of there. The volume is, and then we put in percent of def again, and the amount of paint needed is, and we put in percent of def again. So I'm actually going to change this area to just be paint because we're not actually calculating the area necessarily. We're calculating the amount of paint we need. You could calculate area, take out the cans, and then calculate another variable called paint where it's area by the amount of cans, but just to make everything easier, you want to minimize as many variables as you can. And when you get to second year, you start doing what was the assembly module again? Third years?
The module was embedded systems.
Embedded systems, yeah. You start getting into embedded systems where you actually have to start caring about like the amount of megabytes of memory you use, and you only have like kilobytes of memory to work with. So when you get into digital analog electronics, you start coding for the Arduino IDE where you only have 1 loop. So you have to be conscious of memory allocation. I don't know. Let me see. Do I have my in lab 1? Did he go through like printing a variable? Like if you have like 5, did he go through like how you print not just the number 5 but the actual number? I'm explaining myself badly. Basically, if you have a number that you've calculated like volume or like paint, and you want to show the user that number, where you want the number to be in text, you put in again percentage f because it's a flow. And so this is one for the volume and this is one for the amount of paint needed. You then close off your print, you put in a comma, and then you just put in the variables in the order you want them to appear. So we want volume is percentage f, so you put in volume first, and then paint is percentage f. So then we want the paint to show up next. So just like that. And I think, if I am not mistaken, this should work. Let me mince my words. Oh, okay. So we'll say it's 2 meters long, it's 4 meters wide, and it's 3 meters deep. 2 by 3 by 24. And then we'll say 2 cans paint per. Volume is 24, and the amount of paint needed is 52. So the reason why the numbers are coming up like that is because we're printing them as floats. I'll press any key again and go back into this now. So we could put in like 12 and a half, 3.14, and I can't remember what Euler's number is, but 0.15. And then the amount of cans, you put like 5.678, whatever. And I'll still calculate it. So using floats, they use up way more memory, but they allow you to put in decimal points, which you'll often have when you're taking stuff like measurements, like metric measurements. Very rarely is a basin 1 by 2 by 3. It's something like half or like 3/4 or a little bit over, a little bit under. So I'll just save that. Before we move on to the next question, does anybody have any questions? Feel free. This is to help people who have never coded before. So if you have any questions at all about code, let me know.
Even if you want to throw them in the chat, or even like if you want, even you could do it
That's it.
privately to just Jacob if you don't want like everyone to see your question. You can do it that way either.
Sorry,
Indeed.
what was this program meant to show again?
So this program we were asked to write a program that took in the length, depth, and width of a basin and the amount of cans of paint you would need to paint a square meter. I'll be honest with you, that variable there is a bit weird. Then you would take all of them and then you show the user the volume of the basin, so how much water the basin could hold, and how much paint you would need to paint the outside of it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so this is in cubic. So if you want to get, you could say blank, the volume is whatever cubic meters.
Yeah, that was confusing me. Sorry.
Yeah, in my own one, I have it multiplied by 1,000, and I have it in liters, but in this, it's cubic meters, and this one's in cans. So because we're multiplying here by cans, so yeah, for every square meter, this is cans per square meter. So if this is 40 square meters, 2 cans per square meter, that's 80 cans. So if I run this again, just like that, and we'll say 5 by 5 by 5. Let's say we need 2 cans, 125 cubic meters, and the amount of paint needed is 150 cans of paint.
Yeah, thanks. That was just, I was like,
Yeah.
just like times by cans.
Yeah, I should probably put that in there somewhere. Apologies. 2 cans per square meter is a lot of paint. Well, they're really small cans, one or the other. Cans of paint are like that big. All right, so I will save that. So this is our first function here. Why do you have int main at the top? So I have int main at the top because every C program runs off of int main. This confused the hell out of me when I started coding. Why is this int main? But then also you could have like int n. And that's the same thing. Like why is it called int main? But then you have ints inside an int. Are they not the same thing? Int main is just the name given to the main function of any C program. Whenever you run a C program, whatever is in int main will happen. So right now, I run the program. By hitting this button, it technically runs an executable file that was formed by the compiler. So it runs the executable file and it does all of this. I'm pointing at my screen again. It does all of this. It'll initialize these variables. It'll print this text. It'll take in this variable. It'll do that again and again and again, perform this basic arithmetic, and then print your answers. So int main is just the main function, and everything you want to do has to go into int main. Otherwise, it won't happen. If I were to like, I might do that actually, show you what the difference is. So the reason why you have int main is because inside you don't have to put every bit of code in int main. Int main can be like 2 lines because you could do what's called on an int main void. What's the difference? Void just means that you're not passing anything into it. So in C, you can call on functions. So I could take all of this code here, this float, print, all this print and all these scans. I could copy paste it. I could cut it. I could create a new function called int basin because we're calculating the volume of a basin. And then call it int basin, put in all that code, and then in int main, just go basin, open and close parentheses, semicolon, blank. And when the program runs, it'll run the basin function and then do everything that's in basin, then return back. So I probably won't get into that today. Gabby explains it way better in his lecture notes. But the reason why you have int main void is because when you're doing that thing where you call on functions, you can actually put in numbers from learn the color coding. You can change the color coding to be whatever you want. So I have it set as the basic, but if you prefer looking at it like on my old C compiler, I had it so like int was a different color to float and all that kind of stuff. Makes like a little fun. Kind of, yeah. It forms like a tiny little like mini executable inside an executable. So it'll go run int main. Okay, we're looking for something called basin. Let's go run basin, and it'll run basin, print it all out. Then it'll go back to int main when basin is finished. Then go return 0. That return 0 could also be return exit success, but I just put in return 0 because it's shorter. I feel lazy. But calling on external functions is a big priority. Can you have more than one int main? No. So you can only have one int main, but you can have multiple functions. So I'll just show you now, actually. So if I take all this code, right, and then below int main, if I go int basin, right, and I make a new function, so that's exactly what was in int main. This is the exact same code. And then in int main, if I go basin and then hit compile, the code will go, okay, let's compile all the code, run the executable. It'll run int main. Then it'll go, okay, so first thing to do, basin. And it'll go, what's basin? And it'll go and it'll look for the function basin. It'll then go here, run all of this, do everything that this says, then come back, go to the next line, return 0, and then it'll finish. Let's see. So it basically forms like a mini. You do it a lot in some of the later questions. Some of your later labs will be asked to perform multiple functions all at once. It's also way easier for keeping track of files, as opposed to having 3 questions and 3 files. You could have one file with 3 questions. You can have one file with 3 functions, so that way you can have them all at once. What exactly are the include studio.h? Okay, so those include up here. Those are your libraries. So the C compiler, the actual program that takes this code and turns it into binary digits that then the computer runs. That printf doesn't mean anything, but this the standard IO and the standard library, that is a file that is just filled with these basic functions. And every time you make a program, you load this in, it loads the standard IO into memory. So that way, when the program reads printf or scanf, it goes, oh, I know what that means because it's in this, like, it's like a big book, and it'll go, okay, printf, that's what that does, and then it'll do it. You sometimes see 3 because you'll also see string.h, which is another library you have to implement if you want to work with sentences or words. Right now we're just dealing with numbers, so we don't need it. A lot of you won't deal with much more than standard IO, standard library, and string. You might deal with time.h for random numbers, but those 3 are the main ones I'll be using for this module. Did that answer anybody's questions, or did I just make it more complicated?
Oh, look.
That was grand, thanks.
100.
Brilliant. All right, cool.
Fine.
So
75.
I will just put this back in int main, just because it's a little bit easier. Keep everyone on the same page. So I'm just hitting Control Z a bunch. Yeah, so we finished question 1. So question 2 is, let me have a look. How do I zoom? Question 2 is called, question 2 is called geometric figures. So this is one of the shorter questions that Gabby puts in. Basically, it says you're given, let's see, in the question, you're given this code, right? So he gives you this line of code in the lab manual. He gives you with like extra C's, like little stars, but he asks you to replace the stars with your first initial, which is J. So also the benefit of having things in external functions, if I want to run that printf with all the J's, I have to go through all of this. But if I had it as Basin, I could just comment out Basin and it would go away. I don't have to do it every time. So that's another benefit of calling on functions as opposed to just filling up int main. It makes debugging and testing code way easier. I don't know if Gabby's gone through commenting, but basically if you put these backslashes, right? Yeah. If you put 2 forward slashes before a line of code, it doesn't exist. The compiler does not treat it as code, and it just skips past it. It's really good for commenting your code, because that way, if you give the code to somebody else, or if you submit it to Gabby, they know what it does. You can go, pardon me. You can go this bit. You can go like input of variables. So that way they know that all these lines are the input of variables, but the code, the compiler doesn't see this as code. It doesn't try and go, what the hell does input of variables means? It just ignores it. So it's really beneficial for when you're commenting code, because if you're like, okay, this line isn't working right now, I want to test a different line, but I don't want this to be here. You don't have to delete it and then put it back in. You can just comment it out and then put it back in when you want. So, but I'll leave everything in it for the minute now, just because it's easier. So, oh, did I never close my compiler? Oh, let's see. Nope, I have to finish it. Hold on. Okay, there. Okay. So if I compile this, right, and I go 2, 2, 2, 2, right, cool. Does anybody see where I messed up here? Why is this J up here when the rest of them are down here?
We can't see the compiler. You haven't shared.
I'm sharing the app on my screen. Oh my God. Apologies. This makes no sense. Screen 2. Share. Ta-da! Okay, so could y'all not see my compiler the whole time? Could you not see this little black window?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, that's why. Okay. Okay, I'll run it again then. So I'll comment this out so it doesn't show up. This is what it looks like when you run it. It'll go, please enter the length. 2, please enter the width. 5, please enter the depth. Let's say 15.675, doesn't matter. And the amount of cans per square meter. Let's say it takes half a can. It'll then calculate all the math, which is here, and then output it here. The reason why it has so many decimal places is because it's a float. So it automatically generates those decimal places. It is handy for when your numbers look like this. Pardon me. All right, so that's what the compiler looks like. Apologies. So now I want this bit of code to exist. So we get rid of the comment, and I run it again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see why commenting is helpful, because I would, and like calling on a function, because if I still had it as like Basin and all the code in a different function called Basin, it'll run the same, but I could just comment out that Basin with 2 brackets and none of this entering of numbers and maths would happen. So we could test the other code way easier. But these J's are all on different lines, but this one isn't. Does anyone see where I messed up?
There's no /n before the J.
Yeah, there's no break there. So I run it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So this question, Gabby gives you this bit of code, and he says, make a square and make. I think he gives you a square and he asks you to make a diamond and something else. But we'll go with the diamond. Let's say we want to make a triangle and a square with J's. Real quick, I'm just going to show you what I was on about there. If I click that, type in Basin, right? Then go here, go int Basin, create a brand new function within my program. Control F that in there. So now, if I save that, run that, it'll go, please enter the length, whatever. Okay, so, but let's say if I didn't want to do that every time, I can comment out Basin, and it doesn't happen anymore. So I can test my code without having to go through every bit. Let's say if you have 10 questions and you just want to test question 10, but you've coded everything into int main, you'd have to go, okay, do 1 through 9, now I get to 10. But if you do it like this, you can just do them individually and comment out or comment back in stuff as needed. This is super helpful and is basically the bread and butter of your final exam. Your final exam is involving databases where you have to like, it'll give you a bunch of data and you do a bunch of calculations with data in real time. The exam's kind of hard, I will admit. It's a rough old time pressure, but it's a very interesting exam compared to some of the other ones where it's just theory and a bit of paper. Does anyone want to guess how I would make a square of J's? That's $1. That's a pound. So if this one makes a diamond, how to make a square?
No spaces and just make them all the same amount of J's, I guess.
There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nearly forgot my semicolon at the end. Oh, no, not that one. I don't even know what that button does. All right. Square. That is a square, right? Close enough. Then what if I were to make a triangle? Does anybody want to take a stab at trying to make a triangle? Let's say it's like a not an equilateral necessarily an equilateral triangle, but like a pyramid like that. Think of like a Spanish triangle, that kind of shape.
Be 1J, then 2, then 3.
So I redid this question, and that's what I thought. So 1, 2, that's a capital N. 2, 1, 2, 3. Right. So that. Well, and I'll put another backslash in there. That form is like half a triangle, which I guess is still a triangle. You know what, full marks. That's great. If Gabby asks for a triangle, give him that. That's all he's getting. What I was going to suggest is you like put 2 spaces before and after, and then put in another J and put 1 space before and after, and then put in 5 J's. So it looks like that, but I guess the first one was technically a triangle. So again, code smart, not hard. There we go. For all intents and purposes, that is a triangle. All right. So does somebody have any questions before we move on? That was a relatively.
You explain the J.
Oh, it's just your first initial.
I sent a photo of the question that Jacob's talking about into the Discord as well. If you want to have a look.
Oh, did you actually have it? I couldn't find my lab manual.
I randomly found all my notes. It's great.
Oh,
just there.
Damn, because
I
did
send
have
them
the lab
along to
manual.
you as well.
Thank you.
I
Because I
couldn't
did
find
have
them
the
for
lab
ages.
manual, but I couldn't find it. All right. Let me check the chat real quick.
So it's in the Discord for anyone who wants to have a look at it.
Can anybody see the chat? Because it is completely gone from. Oh, there it is. No. So nobody has any questions? It's just a J because it could be an X, could be an E, could be an A, could be that weird like right angle, whatever that thing is. I don't know what that is. But so we'll move on to the last question. So I'm actually going to do the same thing that I did last time. So anybody have any recommendations for what I should call this function? I'm going to call it Derek. Never thought how to make sense. So int Derek. There we go. So now Derek is going to print all these shapes, but we don't want to see them every time. So we'll just comment them out. So last question. I'm actually going to open up the Discord. So this one, you would benefit more from looking at it. It is in the Discord, but I believe not everyone here is in the Discord. So I'm just going to, oh no, you all can see my Discord. Let me get that out of here. Eunice. All right, give me 1 second. Makerspace. I'm just getting the question here. This one is a bit more, basically it is asking you to print and generate exchange rates. So it gives you the first 2 lines of an exchange rate table of euro, dollars, and pounds. Sorry, it's euros, pounds, and dollars. It's in that order. Specifically, the Makerspace channel isn't loading for me. Sabotage.
Mine's the same. It's just know
Can
what to
somebody,
put
Aoife, can you put it in general because Makerspace, the Makerspace channel has been DDoSed.
Yeah, will do.
Thank you. And then I'll open the original and bring it up for the screen. Anybody have any questions already while we have technical difficulties?
Yeah, if you wanted to do like say 2 spaces instead of 1, can you just do \n/n?
Oh, to like skip 2 lines?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can \n as many times as you want, and it'll just skip that many lines.
Oh, cool.
There's like questions later on, or like when you do those databases, you can like you can get real fancy with it. And as opposed to writing \n 10 times, you can write like a loop that just does the same line of code 10 times over. You can like do a fancy. They're called for loops. Basically, you say for as long as this thing is true, keep doing this. So you can say, I have a number, call it I, and I is 0. For as long as I is less than 10, do this line of code, and every time you do it, make I go up by 1. So it'll do it once, I is 1. It'll do it twice, I is 2. And it'll do it 10 times, because then I will be 10, and the for loop will close. You do a lot. I'm actually going to do it in this question. For loops are really super integral to code, to C code. Like for loops are by far, for loops and while loops, which is like a boneless for loop, really do like make up most of the code that you'll be doing. So can everyone see this question here? Exchange Office?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna ask,
Yeah.
would you have to send a link to the Discord because I don't really know where to find the link.
Are you a member of the Engineering Society?
I am, yeah.
Oh, grand, oh, cool. I'll DM to you on thing now.
Nice.
Invite link. Oh, actually, Aoife, do you mind doing that? Just so I'll get on the question.
Yeah, I'll
This
do
is
that.
in the
No
first
worries.
one. Thank you. So, Exchange Office. Write a program that reads the exchange rates between euro, dollars, and pounds, respectively. Print the following table for euro values from 1 to 10. Ask the user to then input an amount of euro and whether or not they want to change it from dollars or pounds. Then convert it to the right currency, print it, and then, as Gabby always puts in, nice welcome and goodbye messages. I never did that. Aoife always did. Make fun of her. It's funny. Every time Aoife would show me code, I'm like, why is it so polite? So,
You asked for nice hellos and goodbyes. You got to include it, Jacob.
wasted
Be
memory.
nice to the user.
All right, the only thing that'll stop the robot uprising is being nice to the computers. So we have to change euro to dollars to pounds. So does anyone want to? So there's a thing in coding called pseudocode, which is just spitball, like to say what. Does anyone want to try and say what the program will do? Not necessarily the lines of code that will do that, just what we need to do.
The euro has to get increased by 1 every time.
Yeah. So if y'all remember from last semester, we could do this in Excel pretty easily. Just by going 1, 2, dragging down, and then do the same thing, drag down, and the same thing, drag down. I wish we could do it in Excel, but we're in C land now, so we have to do it in C. There are 2 ways of doing this question. There is the easy way, and there is, well, not the cliche, but the hard way. Jake has it right. So I will show you what I did in first year. So what I did in first year was this. This is why I remember what I said earlier on, I never go back and look at your old work. This is why. I just hard coded it. I did the math on a calculator and I wrote it all down on a bit of paper and typed it in one by one, which looks awful. Like that is so memory inefficient. It's so time inefficient. I have to do it on paper, then write it in, put a /n in every time. No, don't do this. So I'll do what I did the second time around. So what I did this a few days ago, I was like, yeah, okay, so we'll do it like this. And I was like, I wonder if I did it first year. I was like, oh, sweet. Do you ever never look at your old work because you will wonder how you got this far. It's like, how did I get to third year? I'll give you 1 second.
No.
I really need to get some hold music for when Jacob disappears like this.
Lift music is what we need.
Elevator music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a recorder.
Go
Leave a
on,
recorder.
mate.
Go on, give us some
Not
tunes.
again.
Go on, go on.
Oh,
Yes.
that's pretty good. Oh,
Go on, boy.
Absolute tune.
Make us proud.
They
Aoife,
may had a little lamb.
Aoife, you could sing for us if you wanted to.
Oh no, please don't.
No, no.
Oh, you guys, you
Not
have to hear
really.
Aoife singing. I've heard it before.
No.
She once sung me a lullaby. Yeah, put me to sleep definitely. Yeah.
Immaculate, I'd say it was.
Why did
You
we
just
all
sleep
learn
or
that
put
in
you in a
primary
coma.
school?
I don't know.
Why did we all learn that?
Can you
I
play
Play
wonder-
recorder.
Can you play Wonderwall on your flute?
Hold on. I'm a flute. I don't,
Did somebody say
my sister
Wonderwall?
Probably can. I can't. Wonderwall on the recorder. What? Tudor is going to
Play
get
Darude Sandstorm.
Sandstorm. Oh, jeez. How long's it been since you played that?
I love how all this is being recorded.
Yeah, exactly. What else
Oh,
was doing it
no.
though, so it's fine.
This one's not going on loop. It's fine. All right. So, where was I? What happened? I'm looking at the chat now. What happened?
elevator music.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm looking at. But you know what? I'm just gonna move on. So I'll do the same thing I did last time. I'll write a new exchange. Nope. I'll write a new function called exchange, and I'll just put it down here. So I know it can be kind of confusing, but does everyone understand what I'm doing here in terms of like putting in int every time? Like they're just different functions, basically different like mini programs inside this one big program, and int main just does them in order. So we have, right now I can think of, we have two numbers for this question. So if I bring up the question. Yeah, so I have two numbers here. Can anyone guess what the two numbers are? I know there's 6 numbers on the screen, but only 2 of them really matter to us at the minute. Anybody?
Is it the
It's
1.29 and the 0.69, is it?
Yeah, so those are, I don't know how to always on top Firefox, but those are our base exchange rates. So we'll have, so we have to use float for this one because we have decimal points. So we'll have float GBP, and we'll initialize that as being, what is it, 0.693. And then we'll do another one for US dollars. And we'll call that, and how much is that? That's 1.293. Okay, so these are the numbers that we'll have to multiply the euro by every time. So if you have to do it from 1 to 10, we can do what I did and go 1 multiplied by those 2 is this, and write that out. 2 multiplied by those 2 is this, and write that out. Or we can do it the smart way, which is use what's called a for loop. So for a for loop, we need a counter. So int, we'll call it I, just because a lot of the time your for loop, the counter in your for loop is called I, sometimes it's called n. But right now, we won't initialize I for a minute. So the structure of a for loop, you have for, and then you have your initial term. So I is equal to 0. So when the for loop starts, I will be 0. Then you want to put in a term of how long this will go for. So we want to do it from 1 to 10. So as long as I is less than 11, and I realize that that's wrong because I needs to be 1 because we're starting from 1 euro. So as long as I is less than 11 and I starts at 1, and the final term is what you want the counter to do every time. So every time we want the counter to go up 1, so it's I plus plus. So you can put in I plus 1, but I plus plus and also I minus minus are just a shorthand way of saying increment each individual time. So, does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next point, before we move on to the rest of the for loop?
Could you use the while loop as well?
You could use while loop. You could just say n and then say as long as, you could say while I is less than 11, and then at the end of each while loop, just put I++, and I'll do the same thing. This just can use either. For loops tend to be more versatile. You can for reverse way easier than you can do while loop in reverse. Like if we wanted to do 10 to 1, we could say I is 11 as long as I is greater than 0 and I minus minus, you can count backwards. So, pardon. So for, actually, before I do this, we want to print f euro, then dollars, then pounds, right? You know that. Dollars, pounds, yeah. So it's euro, US dollars, and Great British pounds. So
Jacob,
yep.
is there any reason why you do I++ rather than just I+1? Like, because if you're going up by 1 each time.
I don't know why that's considered. I++ is considered shorthand for I+1, but it's the exact same amount of characters. Like, you could put in I+1, but I++ is just kind of like the default, I guess. It probably uses less memory or something. Yeah, to be honest, it's less typing because, yeah, you don't have to go I and then plus is all the way over here and the 1 is all the way over here. You just have to hit this one twice. I guess, again, if you're coding 10,000 lines, those mini little finger movements make a difference. But it is just, I think it uses less memory because the standard library, this up here, this standard io.h will C++ and go, he means add 1, which means you don't have to use it memory for 1.
Sorry, if I was equal to 2 and you put plus plus, would it go in increments of 2?
No. I is equal to 1 just means that we're going to start like that. That's our initial term. So if I were equal to 2, it'll do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But because I is 1, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Same thing if you were to change that 11 to 15, it'll do 1 to 14. I think. You could also do I is less than or equal to 10, as opposed to I is less than 11. I should have done I is less than or equal to 10, but however. Yeah, so I++ is, and then the inverse of that, I minus minus, is shorthand for increment and decrement, just up by 1 and down by 1.
So plus plus just always means plus 1.
Always up by 1, and minus minus is always down by 1, yeah. So, just give me 1 second. All right. Okay, so we need to print a line every time. So we can do this one of 2 ways. So let's say print f. Again, there's an easy way and there's a smart way, I guess. It's not necessarily more difficult, it's just you have to think about it a bit more. So like I did up here, if we want to print a variable in text, we have to use this percentage. So it's percentage float, percentage float, percentage float. So if you remember from the picture that we were shown, each line has 3 numbers: the amount of euro, the amount of pounds, and the amount of euro, the amount of dollars, and the amount of pounds. Each line has 3 variables. So the first one is the amount of euro that we have, which is just I, because we're doing it for the first time. We have 1 euro, 2 euro, 3 euro, 4 euro. So the first one that we're going to print is I. That's I, because we're printing an integer, that'll float. Then the second one is dollars, so the amount of dollars. So does anyone know how we can do this by shorthand again? Not using the plus plus, but what's an easy way of getting the amount of dollars for every euro here? If we have to, you don't just have, you can put in basic arithmetic here. So if I have 1 euro, yeah, there you go. So it's I by our constant USD, and then I by our constant Great Britain. So if I then go, so exchange is here. This should work. If I run this, something wrong. I missed a semicolon. There we go. Why did I mess up? I did it again. Can y'all see my compiler?
You didn't put in the slash n.
I put in me breaks like that, and like Okay, so run it again. Hey, there we go. So this is doing it the way I did it beforehand, like where I typed it all out means that I could get it all like level, but like that's way easier, so it's fine. But yeah, so this is our exchange table of 1 to 10 for the amount of euros that you, the amount of dollars and pounds you would get for whatever amount of euros. These are very old exchange. So let's see. You could probably put another one where, as opposed to having this float Great British Pound and float, I'm pointing on my screen again, as opposed to having this float here, as opposed to having these initialized, you could ask the user to input the daily exchange rate for euros and pounds, and that way they would type it in and then it would do the math for them. If you got really fancy with it, you could pull it from some JSON file that XE have. That's everything, but no, it's nothing. So we have a table. So the first part was to print a table for the first 10 values. The second part was to then, let me just double check. Print the following table for euro values 1 to 10. Ask the user to input an amount in euro and express their interest in exchanging it to either USD or Great British Pounds. So we need to ask them how many euro they want to convert. Does anyone know what we need to do here? Anyone?
Like printf with a sentence how many euro.
Yeah. So how much euro? How many euro? How much euro? How much euro would you like to convert? So then we use scan F, and we're scanning in a float because they're probably going to have sense. And this is the thing where, as we go further down the code, scan. Yes, scan F for that. Then this is another thing that Gabby goes on about in his lectures, where it's like the further you get into a function, you're like, oh wait, no, I need another initialized variable. So float. We'll call this one euro. We're not going to initialize that because we initialize the value for it down here. So there's no definitive value for euro until we ask the user to put it in. Next, we need to ask them whether or not they want to convert from dollars to pounds. Sorry, $2 or £2. So we'll do another printf. So would you like dollars or pounds? So there's actually a few ways to do this. And interestingly enough, I actually preferred my first year way of doing it to my second year way of doing it. So, sorry, third year. I'm in third year. When I went and did it a few days ago to have it done for this, I used string compare. So I implemented string.h. I got them to input a string, and then I would compare that string with either GBP or USD, and then I would do each one there. There's a few problems with that. You have to implement another library that uses up memory. You're using a string, which uses up a lot of memory. You're using string compare, which is a very memory intensive function. And it just uses strings, and strings are just like, they can be any length. So like they tend to, the amount of memory that they have allocated to them when they're initialized is massive. So the way that I did in first year is way more memory efficient, surprisingly. No strings, nothing like that. It does involve changing our question though. So can anyone think of how we might, without using strings, accept an answer from the user? Keep in mind, we can change the question. Wonder. Yeah, so just give them a binary choice. So just say, would you like dollars or pounds? And at the end of that, just put 1 for dollars, 2 for pounds. You can do 1 or 0, 2 pounds. And then we scan F, and it means we can scan an integer, which uses way less memory. Again, we have to go back up. We have to initialize another integer. So we're going to call this choice. We're going to call that choice. And then we're going to scan in whatever they have into choice. Herein lies the problem with these really bare bones C programs. What if they don't put in 1 or 2? What if they put in like 9.5 or like the B movie script or like something else? Like, what if they don't put in 1 or 2? There are ways to do that. You could set up like a repetitive thing where if it's not 1 or 2, you go back up to the top and do this whole thing on a while loop. So you can say from like there, you could say while is less than 1. Sorry, while test is greater than 0 or something like that. Like some while function. Then don't put it up until they give the correct answer. You do that. So let's just do it the way that I did it for the minute. So we have an integer put in choice. So you do a fair bit of logic in these. So we're gonna have there's 2 possible. I put in Chucky again. 2 possible answers here, 1 or 2. So if choice is if choice is equal to 1, so we have to use 2 equal signs there because we're checking if something is logically equal to 1, not manually equal to 1. So like it's like I think it's just more definitive. Like it doesn't check whether or not it's. You can also use it for like true or false functions. But if choice is equal to 1, we're going to print their exchange. So printf your amount of data is 1, so dollars is control F. So yes, we could establish another float, call it convert to dollars, and then do the maths on a line before the print, say convert to dollars is equal to the amount of euro that they've input multiplied by the exchange rate. Or we could do it here. We could do this basic arithmetic in here without having to add a new variable or anything like that. So we can just go euro multiplied by USD. So it doesn't put it just no. I'm pretty sure it's being treated as a character limit, so don't. But so yeah, this is the amount of euro they put in multiplied by the exchange rate for dollars. Way more efficient. Not another variable, not another math line, not another line of code. Again, code smart, not hard. The least amount of code possible. Speaking of code smart, not hard. Why type it all out again? Just copy paste it. Change that to if choice is 2. Change that to pounds. Pound as. And change that to Great British pounds. So, fingers crossed. This is still open. It prints it. Anyone see where I messed up again? Yeah, Ben caught it. Yep. I'm just going to cancel out of that. /n, 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 /n. That's like the 3rd time I forgot it, like just tonight. And I forgot it a bunch when I was practicing as well. Simply refuse. Okay, so how much euro would we like to convert? Let's say we have 100 quid. It crashed. Why did you crash? Can anyone actually see why this crashed? Because I actually can't tell.
Is it because you did phi less than 11?
No, see, that's the thing. If I compile, it prints it fine. And it says, how much euro would you like to convert? So I put in a number, let's say 10, and then it crashes out.
Probably because you didn't include the nice hello and goodbye messages. It's
They got pissed at me, yeah. Jesus. Lab 2 reports. Let's go back and look at my old code. Got it. Forgot my ampersand. It was a number. So because we're scanning in a number, we had to put in the ampersand so it attributes to the variable. There we go. I would have been hours looking at that if I didn't have old code. Keep everything you ever write. Selig committed all of his first year code to his damn GitHub. He has all of that stuff like available for like employers to see. Like just like engineers don't learn how to use GitHub in college. I don't know how to use it. Maybe we'll do one later on in the semester on how to use GitHub. That'd be cool. I can.
So you said not to look at old code.
Oh yeah, it's not it's not pleasant, but it's helpful. Like you can look at it and goes like, that's coded like shit, but at least now you know how it works. Like I hadn't done C in 2 years, but I looked at all my old code and I was like, oh, okay, now I know how it works. I now know how to improve that code because that code is bad because it looks bad. But by looking at my old code, I was able to find out, oh yeah, the ampersand. I forgot to put the pointer on for the variables. You go into the full reason of why you need the ampersand, but for now, just take it as gospel that you need it there. But yeah, keep track of everything. My Google Drive is like year 1, year 2, year 3, split into modules and everything like that. Keep track of everything you can because it is invaluable to even like later years. Like I borrowed a 4th year's notes for my exams last year, and some of the 2nd years will be getting notes off of us for the summer exams this year. So let's see if this compiles properly this time. So we have 100 quid. Okay, let's say we want to convert it to pounds. Nice. So we have 69 pounds and 3 cents with a bunch of recurring decimals. So now I'm going to show you what happens if people are mean and if people don't listen. Nothing happens. Like they 1 for dollars, 2 for pounds, and if they just decide to not listen and just put in a number, they won't get anything. There is a way to make it so that way only 1 or 2 work. We're pushing the 1.5 hour mark now, so I'll leave it. But when you're doing lab 2 or when you're doing your second assignment, because a lot of you here have seen how to do all the code and how it all works, try and see if you can think of a way to make it so they can only input 1 or 2. It involves while loops, and that involves 1 more variable, I think. And from there, you should be able to get it. Work on it together. Throw anything in the Discord if you have problems. I'll be teaching C as a 2nd job kind of thing now, so I'll be available to answer questions because the more questions, the better. That's it for lab 2. I was hoping to get onto some of the other problems that I had saved, but far longer than I had thought. But it was good to go through everything manually and kind of go through. So just before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions about anything I've done? Anybody? Let me check the chat actually. Would you lose marks if you have too much code when it comes in shortened down? Yes. So Aoife, do you want to tell that story about the coding assignment you had in secondary school?
No, I don't.
Aoife's teacher was like, here's a coding assignment. It took Aoife 300 lines and she still didn't get it working. You can get it done
No,
in
I
10.
got it working.
In 300 lines. And it took 10. You could do it in 10 lines and Aoife
No,
did it in
actually,
300.
you could do it in 4.
Oh my God. No, smart, not hard. Yes, you could hard code in everything. Yes, we could put in a bunch of lines here. Like, we could put in extra variables for here. This I by USD and I by GBP could be calculated as separate variables for each iteration of the for loop and then passed into the print function that way. And the same here for each choice, we could establish another variable and do this maths. And I'm pointing at my screen. We could do this math here as another variable. We could do this math here as another variable. We could do this math here as another variable, print it all, that kind of thing. You just don't have to. Like, code smart, not hard. Like, it might look good to have 400 lines code, like you're in a matrix, like, but it does help to have concise, simple code because you have to write reports for these things, right? You still have to write reports, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you still have to write reports, it's good if you do the code and then don't do the report for a few days and then come back to look at the code, you're like, what is going on? Like, it's good to have that baseline to go off of for the code so you actually know what you're doing, what it means, where everything is. That's, again, why the comment is really good. So you can be like, if you're not 100% sure of something, if you're not 100% sure of what something does, and you're like, I can't think of what this does, then you find out, you're like, you can comment it in, say what it does, so that way when you come back to it later, you know what that bit of code does. So that way you don't have to ask yourself the question again. If the I variable in the for loop is done, could you reuse it instead of making a new variable, or would that lose marks? You mean like for this choice thing, you could like have here I is equal to 0, like here, you could establish I is 0, and then you use that for the choice. You wouldn't lose marks. It's not like for loops. you could use the same integer for multiple for loops. If I have another for loop down here, I can use I again because I always have my initial term, so it will initialize I again. Well, yes, you could technically reinitialize I here, say I is equal to 0, replace choice with I instead of I is equal to 1 or 2. But doing it like this, there is elements of minimization that begin to hinder your understanding of code. It is way easier to just take I as the for loop number. Like I is doing for loop stuff and nothing else. And it makes it way easier to understand, way easier to change. The benefit of coding the program like this, I could have this as like 30 and it should still work. Let me just come to Basin and Derek real quick. I already have this works. Oh, where'd that go? Yeah, so I can have it all the way down to 30 and 29 and it'll just work. That's the benefit of using for loops. You can just continuously add, or like, you know, I want more lists of this, I want more data, I want more lines. Let me just change it back to 11. So yeah, same thing with this. If you have choice, you could add another choice. You could add another currency. Again, if you have time, your second assessment, add more currencies, add an ability for the customer to add in their own currency exchange rates. That way it's updated. If you want to get real nasty, you could like pull them from the internet and like live update them every time you run the executable. Don't do that because I don't know how it works. I don't even know if you can do that in C. But yeah, that's the intro to C. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Before I go get dinner? No problem at all. I'll be doing another one of these hopefully. The Makerspaces have been mostly these intro sessions. Not something important, but if you wanted the number to line up, would involve somehow triggering /b if greater than 10. What do you mean by /b is greater than 10 there, Alex? You can make the numbers line up by like messing around with spaces and like, you know, you could move stuff around, but again, place. You could, but as you saw there, it got worse every time. So like, I mean, I guess you could count the amount of times that it takes to change and then implement a backspace for every nth one or whatever. But if you ask them specifically to be in line, then do that. But again, you don't have to do it. But yeah, a lot of our Makerspaces this year have been these intro series. I've loved doing them. It's not a thing we've done before, but it's seemed to help out a lot. We are planning on doing other Makerspaces. I still have to solder 160 cables for our Makerspace kits. Every time I think about it, I want to cry because it's going to take forever. But we can't expect people to have soldering irons. So I bought a new soldering iron for it and everything. It's over there. But yeah, I have a lot of fun doing these intro sessions. They're good practice for teaching. And if you have any questions, throw them in the Discord, or I guess ask us on Instagram if you're on the Discord. Join the Discord. But to do that, join NSOC if you're not already a member. It's only €2 for the year. We have our AGM in week 6. 7 committee members are in third year, therefore cannot rerun because they will be on internships. Not me. Long story. But actually, I'm going to stop recording. How do I stop recording?